These are the personal belongings.
One unique number, and number for the case.
Each bag represents a human life.
A few kilometers from the Turkish-Greek border, the police got a tip-off. There was a body in the forest. Now Kostas Papachrysostomitis, the local funeral director, has been given the job of recovering the remains with his colleagues.
Hey, police officer, let's get started before it's dark.
A nice area, actually, if we weren't here for this reason.
Do we take everything?
Just gloves.
One route taken by migrants trying to get from Turkey to the European Union passes through the forests of the Evros region. Most migrants travel in groups. This disused shed seems to have served as a makeshift shelter. The sleeping bags look as if they've been abandoned in panic. Crossing from Turkey to Greece is illegal for migrants without a visa. They hide from the police, and they try to make their way through this difficult terrain to leave the border behind them. The funeral director has no idea what condition the body is in.
It's over here.
Not far from the Evros in the regional capital Alexandroupoli is the University Hospital. Forensics professor and medical examiner Pavlos Pavlidis works here. All the migrants' bodies found here are brought to him.
In the last 22 years, I've seen about 600 dead bodies on the Greek side alone. Theoretically, hypothetically, we could say that there are just as many dead on the Turkish side. So we're talking about 1,200 to 1,500 people. But we receive a lot more search requests than that from relatives.
The forensic scientist works on behalf of the state. He doesn't just determine the cause and time of death. Most of the migrants aren't carrying any form of ID, so he also tries to identify them.
In the case of dead migrants who get into our country illegally, we first examine them externally and describe their clothes, shoes, or whatever they have with them. We photograph them, then we remove their clothes and look for personal effects and documents.
The medical examiner had more cases in 2022 than ever before. Most were young men.
The head is put on this side and the legs there. The body lies here. And from this side or the other, we conduct all the examinations necessary for a proper autopsy and to solve the case.
The region here is named after the Evros, the river on the border between Greece and Turkey, the external border of the EU. The frontier is heavily guarded. Since 2020, a fence has been steadily growing along the length of the river. The barrier is meant to keep migrants out of the EU. But many attempt the crossing nevertheless and die in the process.
There shouldn't be any particularly hard cases for someone like me. But when children are involved, it's more difficult for us.
The funeral director and his assistant have found the body. It seems other migrants have buried him in a shallow grave.
It's close to the surface.
Backwards. Pull it. Pull. Yes, that's it. Pull. Pull. Okay, that's it.
Didn't he have any shoes?
No, the other migrants often take them.
Okay, done.
The body of the dead man and some of his clothes now have to be taken to Alexandroupoli so Professor Pavlidis can examine them. How old?
You think I have his ID? Bones are all that's left.
Kostas Papachrysostomides stops off at his funeral home. He built up the business together with his family. He also deals with ordinary cases. But nowadays, recovering dead bodies from the border makes up a large part of his work.
This is where I wash the bodies and then put them in the refrigerator. Once I brought 35 of them here after they drowned in the Evros.
If identification is possible, relatives living in Europe often come to pay their last respects here at the funeral home.
It's very hard. They're crying. They're all crying. Can you imagine? They travel so far to either pick up the body of a dead relative or to bury them here. Or I bring the body to Turkey, and it's transported home from there.
If a family can't afford to have their loved one's body repatriated, it is buried here, in a cemetery especially set up for Muslims who come from elsewhere. Their countries of origin are inscribed on their graves: Somalia, Afghanistan, Syria. People of all ages. Many of the graves are fresh. What makes this border so dangerous? The river looks harmless. It's shallow in many places.
The Evros is a dangerous river. It's broad and deep in parts. The human smugglers don't allow migrants to take any luggage on board their boats. They are forced to wear several layers of clothing, 2 or 3 pairs of trousers, 5 shirts. If just the slightest thing happens and the boat capsizes, they sink with all these clothes like dead weights.
So many people are crammed into the boats that they often tip over. Drowning is the most common cause of death. Hypothermia is the second most common. Other deaths are linked to exhaustion.
We know these people are exhausted, have walked for many hours. That's why there are other causes of death besides drowning. Imagine a man, tired and wet after swimming across the river, wearing many layers of clothing, and who then takes a rest. That's why hypothermia is the second most common cause of death. Of course, there are also some people with pre-existing medical conditions they weren't aware of who die from overexertion.
It's already dark by the time the funeral director takes the remains from the forest to the hospital's Institute for Forensic Medicine. Professor Pavlidis plans to forensically examine the bones the next morning. The remains are stored at 0 degrees Celsius in a morgue refrigerator. Who was this person? Who might be looking for them? In Hanover, Sevar Kasim is trying to trace his younger brother. He's a Kurd who fled to Germany in 2015 after war broke out in Syria. He's just finished training to be a truck driver. The rest of his family fled to Iraq, along with his brother Mohammed.
He was very good in school. He always ranked first or second, and we wanted to offer him a better life. That was also my goal. It's impossible to put into words, indescribable. We are very close to one another. I was very lonely the whole time. I have a lot of friends, but still, it's nothing like being brothers. No matter who you're friends with, family is always number one. I was really looking forward to him coming, but...
Because the situation was also difficult for Sevar Kasim's family in Iraq, the family decided to send his 14-year-old brother to Germany in fall 2021, across the Evros route.
Just like everyone else, with a people smuggler or on foot, with a boat, and illegally because it's not possible to do it legally. And anyway, we didn't have any documents in Syria.
In October 2021, Mohammed got in touch from Turkey and said that he was planning to cross the Evros River with a group of others. On the 21st of October 2021, Sevar Kasim got a phone call in Hanover.
It was the people smugglers. They said that something had happened and that Mohammed had fallen into the water. They said they waited but couldn't find him. That was a lie. We found out that they hadn't waited and simply carried on. They were frightened because what they were doing was illegal.
He flew to Greece, to Evros, to look for his brother. He had his DNA registered. Back at home, he scoured Facebook, visiting search platforms for missing migrants, all in vain. The internet is swirling with rumors, horror stories about missing migrants. Sevar got dubious offers to find Mohammed's body for 2,000 euros. He ignored them, hoping for a sign of life from his brother.
It's really difficult. It's hard to put out of your mind, no matter how long the wait. But I hope it'll end well.
Good morning.
The next day, Pavlos Pavlidis has to examine the bones from the forest. He has already received instructions from the state prosecutor's office. The forensics professor has been the medical examiner for the Evros region for 22 years. He gets inquiries from all over the world from people desperate to find out what has become of their loved ones, asking whether he had identified them among the bodies recovered from the border region. They send photos, videos taken shortly before the crossing, spots by the river where the missing person was last seen. Pavlidis is not permitted to respond directly until he has verified the identity of the person making the inquiry. Sevar Kasim from Hanover has sent him the photo of his missing brother, Mohammed.
I'm initially looking at hair color, eye color, then the earlobes, the cheekbones, and the shape of the face. They're characteristics that you can easily recognize, particularly anything linked to bone.
Is there any chance that the remains found in the forest could be Sevar Kasim's brother? The examination begins.
Oh, God.
What was the time and cause of death? Are there any clues about the identity of the deceased? The more intact the body is, the better.
First of all, we'll take photographs.
What can you see? Is there a femur bone at least?
There's no skull.
And there are many missing bones. Pavlos Pavlidis takes DNA samples from one. They are stored here and in a central database in Athens.
I also need one for anthropology, so 3 samples in all.
The forensic scientist and his assistant interrupt their work when the funeral director arrives at the hospital. The dead are stored in refrigerator containers out back. 10 bodies are scheduled for burial. They couldn't all be identified. Kostas Papachrysostomitis has to take the right ones. The smell of decomposition hangs in the air. They all want to get it over with as quickly as possible. The mood is tense.
Leave it.
Wait, we need order. So it's one but not the other.
This one and this. Bring a bag. Stop. 260B can go.
This one?
Yes. 7, 8, 9, and a body from the other container make 10.
This one.
This one here.
That makes 8.
No, there are 10. The label fell off as it was being moved. You've already got this one here.
The funeral director takes the unidentified bodies to the cemetery for nameless migrants in the region's north. The professor continues to examine the remains from the forest.
The black jogging pants? We'll need this too. We'll store it.
It's possible to estimate a person's size on the basis of the femur length. They inspect the bones to see if there were any fractures prior to death.
Take that too, separately.
After 20 minutes, the examination is over, and it's time to make final preparations.
First impression, it's a young man, about 20 years old, without hand, without nothing, only bones, nothing else. The cause of death, we don't know.
A young man died in the forest close to the border. He was probably traveling with a group of migrants. Was he injured? Perhaps during a violent altercation? That wouldn't be unusual, people say. And then simply left behind?
In this case, there are no signs of violence prior to death. We've ruled out foul play as far as we possibly can. The state of the body is such that it seems likely that other medical problems led to his death.
It's possible that the cause of death was organ failure or hypoglycemia. The remains were found just a few kilometers from a village. The medical examiner is not surprised that the young man didn't make it that far, or that nobody from the group went for help.
The village is close by, but if someone is dehydrated and too tired to walk, then they won't make it that far. These people avoid the villagers because they're afraid they'll hand them over to the police. And they hide from the police because they're afraid of being arrested.
The border zone is closely monitored and is off-limits for the public. It's guarded by Frontex on behalf of the EU and by the Greek police. Konstantinos Tsoulakidis comes from the Evros region. He can remember a time when the river was more accessible. The building of the border fence started in 2020. It's 5 meters high and some 38 kilometers long, and it's being steadily extended. More of a fortification than a fence.
The fence is an artificial barrier built to stop anyone who tries to cross the river to get into Greece. It has a deterrent effect.
But the Evros is almost 200 kilometers long in total. And in wetland areas, it's not so easy to erect a barrier on the riverbank as it is here. Does the construction of such fortifications simply prompt migrants to take a different route? Rather than preventing illegal crossings, does it just make them more dangerous?
No, I wouldn't say that. The problem has always existed. There were always migrants who died in the forests or remote areas, in the mountains.
The funeral director is on his way to the cemetery for anonymous migrants. He's transporting 10 dead bodies recovered from the border zone.
Come on, let's start.
What number is that?
11622.
Okay, take it.
When they arrive, volunteers have already dug the graves. Each one of the 10 deceased migrants has a grave marked with a number. The Greek state pays the burial costs. It's a distressing task.
Is there a number here?
Yes, 116122.
I get paid for this. I recover the bodies, then I transport them, then I bring them here. But for these people who have died, isn't it a pity?
The men don't hurry the task. They check the numbers of each individual body and the number of each grave. Then the burial takes place.
I don't know who's lying there. The body hasn't been identified. Relatives can ask the forensic scientist for the number, and it's marked here.
In Alexandroupoli, it's now clear that the body found in the forest cannot be Sevar's missing brother. The age didn't match. And the medical examiner has also ruled out that 14-year-old Mohammed is among the unidentified bodies found earlier.
He's still a child. I would remember him. No, unfortunately, it doesn't ring any bells.
In Hanover, Sevar Kasim still has no idea what happened to his brother. Sometimes, he would almost prefer to hear that his body had been found.
Of course, it wouldn't be easy, but it would be better than not knowing. If we knew that he had died and could bury him, then it would be clear. It is what it is, something we'd have to accept. But this uncertainty, I find that really, really awful. It's the worst thing for me.
Sevar is tortured by the disappearance of his brother.
It doesn't matter what you do, you can't forget. Unfortunately, it's simply a fact.
According to the International Red Cross, 541 migrants are classed as missing in Greece. People whose friends and loved ones are desperate to find out what has happened to them, just like Sevar. With each passing day, it's ever less likely that his brother made it out of the river alive.
I haven't given up hope, and I won't until we know one way or another, no matter how long it takes. Sometimes we feel we can't go on, but we won't give up, as long as is humanly possible.
Professor Pavlos Pavlidis is on his way to the state prosecutor's office. He has 52 open cases at the moment. A sense of duty won't let him close them yet. And he fears there will be more in the winter.
We have been experiencing it for 22 years now. Unfortunately, the people dying are all quite young. That's the worst thing. Death is always a difficult topic. But I'm a scientist. I separate the professional and the emotional. And I don't let emotions interfere with my job.
Will there be a ceremony?
No, a civil burial.
Will someone come?
Someone used to say a prayer for the dead. Not anymore.
Did you say it?
I got a religious leader.
Why did it end?
You're all getting on my nerves now. You sit in your offices and think you're something special.
After about 20 minutes, all the bodies have been buried. The fact that the funeral director believes in life after death isn't any comfort for him at that moment.
When is life over? When you can't touch or pull your earlobe. Can your soul touch it? There is life after death, but just for the soul. It doesn't have a body. It's invisible.
And then stillness descends again on the cemetery for the nameless dead, anonymous migrants at Europe's border. Who will mourn them?